welcome to the fourth season of Nature Cure, the podcast that is completely dedicated to holistic health enthusiasts, healthcare professionals, and aspiring holistic healthcare professionals. My name is Dr. Erica Steele. I'm a board-certified naturopathic doctor. I hold 6 degrees in my field. They are all in the natural healthcare space. If you've listened to all of the podcasts up until this point, we talked about in the first one really about the history of naturopathy and how it came to be and how it came to the States and all the things related to that. In the second one, we really focused in on the modalities because let's face it, that's usually the sexiest part of naturopathy is all of the various modalities and tools and techniques and treatments that are not typically found in conventional healthcare practice, but that are often utilized in naturopathy and natural healthcare, as well as holistic healthcare practices. Then we focused on the science behind it and diagnostics, and we kind of started just kind of a general overview of diagnostics and how we look at things. So now in this episode, what I really want to take home is how we build treatment plans and how we work with our patients, because it is a different mindset entirely. Most of us have been raised on conventional healthcare practice. And when I say conventional, that's going to be your standard medical provider, where you have a symptom and then you're going to go into that particular doctor's office and then bring up all their symptoms. They may run labs, they may not. They may just take it based off of your symptom, and then they're going to give you a procedure, a surgery, or a pharmaceutical if one is available. If none of those are available, oftentimes what they'll do is active surveillance. So they'll just watch it. And so they'll say, oh, these numbers are elevated, come back when you're sick enough. They don't say that typically, but that's the mindset. It's like, oh, well, these numbers are high, but they're not too high, or, oh, these numbers are low, but they're not too low. And really, truly, it's because the body has not manifested disease yet. When we're looking at how the body goes from health to disease, let's break that down. So the first aspect is nutrients. The body needs to have enough nutrition. So oftentimes that's the first place that we start, because in naturopathy and holistic medicine, we're more proactive instead of reactive. So we don't wait until there becomes a problem. What we do is we want to prevent and stabilize the health of the person first. And that can be tricky sometimes because people will come into our practice, unfortunately, really, really sick, and they just want a quick fix. And that's not what our practice is designed to do. That is more of a conventional practice. So you go in, you wait, you have your signs, you have your symptoms. And then eventually what happens is you go in and they'll give you a prescription, and it's seemingly like it's all better, when in fact it's not. And oftentimes there's other side effects, and then those side effects need to be managed, and the list goes on and on and on. But it's the mindset of reactivity, meaning that people are not necessarily intrinsically thinking about their health. They just dismiss it. They go, oh, well, I don't have any symptoms, or I don't have any disease or diagnosis, so then that means that I'm healthy, when in fact that's not. Health is a state that we create every single day. We build it by, meditation, mental health, emotional health, physical health, drinking water, eating protein, keeping our fats where we need them to be, minimizing simple carbohydrates, detoxification practices. The list goes on and on and on. It's what we're doing consciously every single day to be able to support our health and well-being. So in a holistic practice, a patient will come in and they have a myriad of symptoms and sometimes even a diagnosis. And sometimes it can be frustrating because we're moving them out of this reactionary model. Like people often want to apply conventional practices to a natural practice, and it just doesn't translate. So what that looks like is somebody will have, let's say, high cholesterol or hypertension, or they have anxiety or whatnot. And then they come, and instead of taking the pharmaceutical, they want to give you a natural solution. And that's actually what we call alternative medicine, where we're choosing an alternative. While I have education and training in alternative medicine, that's not the style of practice that I subscribe to. Why? Because again, you're merely just managing a symptom. The only difference is you're doing it with a natural substance versus a not natural substance. What does that do? It creates dependency on the substance, whether that's natural or not, which is why I don't particularly care for that type of treatment or that style of practice. However, there's this distinction because people get really frustrated because they want to get well, not realizing that this has been going on for a long time, not realizing that their system has been breaking down. And then eventually what happens is that the dam breaks, so to speak, and they're flooded with symptoms. So part of what we do in the beginning is help people to change their mindset around their health and their well-being and help them to be conscious of what they're actually doing. Because if we don't really know what we're doing in the current reality that's making us sick, then unfortunately what's going to happen is we're just going to find ourselves right back where we started, and then we're going to have to go seek out another healthcare professional, et cetera, and the wheels kind of keep turning. Rather, what I like to do, especially as a public health professional, is I like to educate patients. So I break down all the data. I assess all this subjective data, which is what the patient tells me, their signs and their symptoms. Objective data, which is laboratory diagnostics that will take something outside of me, something outside of you to measure effectiveness. And then I create a roadmap for us. And that roadmap has intervals in it. So in the beginning, we're working on building, obviously, after we get out through mindset, we're working on building nutrition in the body because we want to make sure that the body has enough energy in order to heal. So oftentimes people think, oh, I'm just going to jump into detoxification. And that's a big no-no, because if the body doesn't have enough energy to simply just make sure that all of the basic tasks that need to be completed throughout the day, you're not leaving it exhausted, you're not waking up exhausted, you're not going through the day exhausted. We want to make sure that we have enough energy just to do our daily activity and feel good. And then we want to boost up so we have a little bit more energy. So because detoxification is going to require additional energy. That's why oftentimes if people jump into detoxification, they will have what we call a healing crisis, or they'll have all these symptoms. And I'm not saying that every detox is symptom-free, because that's not the case, but the symptoms should be mitigated, meaning that it should not be super over the top. You shouldn't be super, super sick when you're detoxing. Like, nobody has time or energy, nor is it healthy to put yourself in a healing crisis and then you've got, the shades drawn and now I'm detoxing. That's not how we do it professionally. That's how amateurs do it, or people that are undereducated, or, people that are just selling a detox program, which we want to be mindful of that. There are a lot of, just like in conventional practice, there are a lot of pitfalls and things to consider. The same thing goes in natural healthcare. There are a lot of pitfalls and things to consider, which is also why just me seeing so much over the years that I've been in this, and now with this almost resurgence of interest in natural healthcare, I really wanted to create some sort of standardized education, because you've got so many different opinions. You've got people that are self-taught, and I think it's great to be self-taught. However, there is a structure behind formal education. Now, you may not agree with the structure of formal education, and I can understand why, et cetera, but there is something that occurs mentally, and just consciously when you are being formally trained, because you're being formally trained in a process rather than kind of just going, oh, I'm going to look up a whole bunch of stuff in the internet and start taking it, especially without any diagnostics or any diagnostic training. Also, too, all diagnostics are not created equal, so again, like, I'll hear buzzwords. There's a lot of buzzwords out. So buzzwords like biochemistry, right? Well, true biochemistry, you actually have to take the sciences. So anatomy, physiology, biology, chemistry, organic chemistry, non-organic chemistry, and then biochemistry, right? Biochemistry, what is that? It's life chemistry. So it's how all of these chemical processes happen within our bodies and make things happen. So it's more than just a buzzword. If you're not looking at labs and you're not evaluating labs on a deep level, or you're just running a whole bunch of labs and, telling people a whole bunch of stuff and not really knowing how to apply. I think that's the biggest thing with structured, education is, you not only learn the information, but you also learn how to apply the information. And it's done more so not an anecdotal perspective, meaning like, oh, well, this person, felt better, this person felt better, and not knowing how to replicate that. And that's also, why we want standardization and standard practice. So because there's a lot of nuance when we're dealing with human beings, and so there's also patterns that you see consistently amongst human beings. And so learning those things from skilled professionals and people that have that experience is critical for you to be able to really not just be successful in the field, but also to gain results, because that's oftentimes why people leave conventional practice, because they're frustrated. They keep seeing the same patients over and over and over again, or they keep seeing the same treatments being done over and over and over again, but there's no result. So we don't want to take that same mindset into, a natural health or a naturopathy practice or holistic practice, because then why not just go be a medical doctor, right? And so nothing against medical doctors, but we want to make sure that there is a structure and that there is a process that we're following so that we're able to, have baselines, monitor, measure, and then of course gain results for our patients. And that's really what it's about. I know for me, I gained a lot of respect in the medical allopathic conventional community because the results that they were seeing with my patients. So maybe, the patient would come in and say, oh, I'm now seeing, a holistic doctor or a naturopath. And the doctor's like, then, and the patient was like adamant, well, I understand your beliefs. That's great. But this is what I'm doing for my health. And then the doctor's like, okay, we'll see how it goes. And then as I'm working with the patient, the doctor's now seeing the labs improve. And as they're seeing the labs improve, they're like, wow, well, whatever you're doing, it's working. So keep it up. Right. I can remember I had a case that came to me. It was a young lady who had been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. She had rejected the conventional treatments like immunosuppressants and steroids. She said, no, I'm not interested in that. She said, I'm going to seek out a natural approach. The doctor was like, okay, well, I'm okay with that because, these treatments are pretty aggressive. So, by all means, go, see what you can do. So the patient came to me, worked with her on her mindset, her stress, her food, detoxification, getting her system. I also ran very specialized diagnostics in the beginning to confirm, was this actually RA or was this just an autoimmune response that was starting to look like RA? And so she did have a couple markers, but none that were significant enough to be able to send her back to rheumatology and say, okay, I think this is the best course of action just based off of it. So we worked together over time. It wasn't always easy. Patients are facing themselves. You're guiding them through a process. It's not like, you'll tell them once and then they'll be like, okay, yeah, totally, I'm on board. Some people, yes, but the vast majority, change is difficult. And so you're working with patients, you're encouraging them, you're allowing them to see a different way of being, a different presence, different understanding. And that can be deeply confronting, triggering for people. However, once they are able to process through that and get to the other side, they really get their lives back. And so I love that process of transformation and watching people. So long story short, she was successful in her treatments. We worked together for, I believe it was a year, and then maybe she did like one renewal, and then now just comes for annual guidance on her detoxification schedule. And when she went back to her rheumatologist was amazed, so much so that now a rheumatologist refers patients to me. So that's the advantage here, is you're not just, anecdotally giving people a whole bunch of stuff. Again, this is one of the biggest pet peeves I have, especially now that people have a growing interest in holistic healthcare. There'll be people that will get online, especially, and they'll have anecdotal stories. What does that mean? So they'll say, oh, well, I did X, Y, and Z. And I understand why they do that, because they went through that conventional practice route. And unfortunately, they just did not gain any support. The conventional doctors were not able to, assist them. Or even still, I've seen some that have been to functional doctors or holistic doctors, or so they think, and also, again, not getting results. And so by the time they come to me, right, they're usually very frustrated. And so I can understand that a patient wouldn't even get to me because I'm only one human being, which is also why I want more people educated in the methodologies that I use, that they would then take matters upon their own hands and start to educate themselves. Now, here's the positive and here's the negative of that. So they learn, however they learn. A lot of times they don't have the diagnostics or the scientific background. They're literally just looking up symptomology. So they're looking up this disease process or that symptom, and then they're looking up what treats that particular symptom or condition. And then they're just taking whatever, they're changing their diet, etc. Again, there's no laboratory monitoring of what's going on. Now, I'm not saying that there's not good other diagnostic practices in naturopathy. There's iridology, as a for instance, or live blood cell analysis, which is more small. I use whole blood as a primary specimen, and then I'll use other specimens just depending. And so they may feel better, right? They may lose weight, or they may feel like their symptoms have, diminished, but there's nothing that actually proves that what they think they did, they actually did. And I know I may get some heat about this, but that was part of Dr. Seebe's challenge, is that he had healed himself and he was self-taught. And so then he took that information and started working with other people, but there was not any diagnostic tool being able to use. And then he was making claims saying that he can cure people. Okay. We do not cure people. I cannot even say this enough. That is not our role, right? In conventional practice, they use and monopolize the word cure. There are certain words that the conventional allopathic practices, they own. And so therefore, we cannot use them. But even still, we don't need to use them or want to use them simply because, they really don't apply. When we're working on the actual function of the system and we're working on how the body actually works rather than managing it. So we don't diagnose, we don't manage, we don't cure, because that's not our role. Instead, what we do is we look at the actual function of the body, we look at how the body works, and then from there, we educate the patient on what they need to do proactively. So we tap into the wisdom and the body's ability to heal itself, right? That's not curing. Curative, that is really between the patient and their creator, their belief system, whoever their higher power is. Because certain times patients will choose not to heal on this side. I've done a lot of end-of-life care, and I've done a lot of also very aggressive diseases, different cancers and things like that. I've worked with cases that these patients come in and they have very aggressed cancer. And I think it's very important to mention that some of the people that are in this self-taught phenomena, right, they think that because they were able to have these, removal of symptoms, et cetera, that it applies to everybody without this deep level of understanding. And so I am very much, I live my life natural. I teach natural. I raise my daughter natural. I live a very natural, holistic lifestyle. However, I also took an oath to first do no harm. And that means that I'm looking at what the best benefit is for the patient. So if a patient comes in and they have a very aggressive tumor, okay, that is, stage 4, super aggressive, and you can see how aggressive it is. It keeps growing back, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's non-responsive to treatments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to give that patient false hope. Okay. But I'm also not going to discourage that patient from realizing that they can heal. Now, whether they heal on this side or they heal on the other side, that's not my responsibility to intervene and say. What I do is I follow a process to help guide, to help heal, to keep that nutrition up. But at no time am I going to have these blanketed approaches. We all know that chemotherapy is incredibly toxic. We know that radiation is also toxic. However, sometimes these particular conventional treatments are necessary in order to extend life or prolong life. Now, that does not mean that every case needs that, right? Stage 1, stage 2, stage 0s, stage 3s, different, totally different phenomena, right? And even 2, sometimes stage 4, depending on where it is and depending on how it came to be. So every single case is unique and different. And I think we often want this blanketed, one size fit all approach, even if we're in the holistic minded world. And it just does not exist. There is not one blanketed treatment for everybody. If that were the case, I would be a multi-gajillionaire and, not even on this video with you, honestly. Just joking. I'd love that. But, definitely I would be pursuing, more philanthropy, pet projects and, building schools and, underserved populations and all kinds of stuff. Because truly, right, there wouldn't be a need for providers, right? And even still, even though because the patient's very frustrated, they're trying to remove the provider out of the equation. And unfortunately, it's just not going to be possible because every human being has a lot of nuance and there's a lot to every single case. It's not clean, cut and dry. And it's not, everybody's going to do this. And also too, we don't want to look at people like diseases. Even in natural healthcare, we don't do that. That's a conventional practice. What I mean by that is a patient comes in and let's say they have diabetes, right? If you have a quote unquote diabetes protocol, right, for every patient that has diabetes, you're not in holistic medicine. You're not doing natural healthcare. You're just an alternative medicine provider. That's it. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I think it's important to understand the distinctions, right? Because just because somebody says something, just because somebody pretends like they are all knowing, right, does not mean that they know. Right? Just because they've healed themselves doesn't mean they're qualified to help facilitate other people through a healing process. Now, I'm not saying that they can't provide general information for educational purposes only and to guide people to a certain direction. I think that's great. But when you come out and say, which I've heard many times, oh, we can cure this and we can cure that and we can, and they have no background, especially again, now a buzzword is trauma, right? Everybody wants to treat trauma. Okay, so as a person who has, been diagnosed with PTSD at 14, somebody who's healed my trauma, not just physically, mentally, emotionally, but also neurologically, and still work on healing every single day. It's a lifelong, because I had developmental trauma, so it's a lifelong experience, right? It becomes really concerning to me, people hanging their shingle out with no training, again, in psychology, in trauma treatment, in various different modalities, because especially with somebody with trauma, they are very neurologically impaired and neurodivergent and can have symptoms of anxiety, depression, manic episodes, all kinds of different things. And so again, if you're touting, oh, I can do this, this, and this XYZ, we can just, heal generational traumas and generational curses with no real structured methodology, with no real treatment, and you're just selling herbs on a website. I have a real issue with that. And I know I'm on a soapbox and I really apologize, but I just want the general public to understand because I've seen it. I continue to see it. It's very concerning for somebody like me who has been in the field for over 20 years, who has been in the field, the world of this her entire life, who was raised doing this work. I didn't just in the last couple years go, oh, wow, like I remember when nobody said the word holistic, it was 2011. And the year 2012 was the trend when the word holistic started coming out and people started heavily using it to market, right? And that's also why I really wanted to create a holistic healthcare school so people could understand the distinctions and the training. Part of the reason why I have 6 degrees is because I wanted specialized training in all the aspects of that pertain to holistic medicine. So what are those as we recap and kind of wind down? It's physical. So that is going to be nutrition, physical fitness, biochemistry, supplementation, anything that's a disease process, integrative health, that's all going to be within the physical realm, pharmacology, et cetera. So all of those things are all within the physical realm. Then we look at environment. We look at, work-life balance for the patient. We look at relationships. We look at relationships with self. We look at self-care. We look at time. We look at time management. We look at their interpersonal relationships, their friendships, their boundaries. That's all in the environmental realm. Not to mention environmental toxicities and exposures, and also genetic predispositions to things. We also going to look at the mental health. So that's the conscious mind, that's the subconscious mind, that's the primitive mind, that's belief systems, that's core beliefs, that is defense mechanisms, that's all the psychological components of the human being. Then we look at the emotional coping skills, emotional intelligence, emotional resilience, how somebody is emotionally processing. Are they shut down or are they highly reactive and maybe their nervous system is dysregulated because of previous traumas? Then we look at their spiritual connection, not their religious connection, but their spiritual connection. What is their relationship with their intuition? What is their relationship with trusting self? What is their intuition with, their relationship with a higher power? Those are all really important to commune with. Do they believe that there is something greater out there than themselves, or do they feel like they are it, right? The buck stops with them. And then we look at ancestral. So again, looking at not only genetics, but also looking at transgenerational traumas and behavioral patterns that have been passed down, and people choosing whether they want to, end those cycles, or how they're teaching their children how to heal, right? And not carry those things on. So again, having specialized education in all of those areas, kind of having a bird's eye view to take a step back and look at everything and be able to prioritize and put those things together, right? That takes time, and it takes an incredible amount of personal knowledge as well as structured education to be able to not harm people. I cannot even tell you how many patients wind up in my office who have been to providers on either side of the street who did not know what they were doing and caused harm. Either the patients were taking too much supplements or too many herbs. The patients were, physically having detox reactions. All kinds of different things were occurring, and it really wasn't serving them as an individual. And so they had to learn, unfortunately, the hard way. So I'm hoping, as you learn this stuff, because I teach you, that you understand what to look out for. If something is too good to be true and somebody is promising you the world, the moon, the stars, that's a red flag. If you ask them what their credentials are and they cannot tell you, they won't tell you the schools they've been to, or they give you a whole bunch of buzzwords like, oh, I'm a biochemist, or I'm an herbalist, or I'm a shaman. That's another one that people throw around. Also to recognize that, and I see this more in the Western imperialized kind of culture, is that they want to adapt this word shamanism, right? So having indigenous lineage is also not enough when it comes to shamanism. That is something that is passed down through our bloodlines. So me being a native, that was passed down early on. Mysticism, shamanism, alchemy. Those were things that were passed down, right? Things that I learned early on, to speak with spirit, to be able to be present with self, right? To have a connection with my ancestors. These were things that I didn't learn in books. These were things that I learned through doing spiritual work as a little girl growing up in a Native American structure, from my parents. And so I think that's another piece that people speaking out, especially people that are of European descent, speaking out. I know I just saw the medical medium did a podcast on psychedelics, plant medicines, and the dangers of those. And of course, it was to promote his book, right? And here's the thing. Those medicines are used for a very specific purpose and a specific reason. It is not a first-line defense. It is not something that people should be using daily. It is not something that people, are, privy to. There is a big mental, emotional, spiritual, psychosocial work that has to be done, and it's within a structure of a ceremony that is led by someone such as myself who has that background and has that lineage. This is not something that you go to a weekend course in Costa Rica with a whole bunch of people from European descent that have no connection to the work. And I know that may piss some people off, and that's okay. But I have a real problem when there's gentrification within our profession. We've had that enough. We've had that trauma happen enough. We've had our works, our healing practices, our land, our people taken from us over and over and over again. And the time has really come for those things to stop. So if you don't have those types of lineages, I really don't feel like you have the place to be able to have that communication about these particular things. And so really pay attention to where people's credentials are, what their motives are, and from there, really listen to yourself. Oftentimes, patients will be led to me. It's not a situation where obviously we do marketing and things like that, but I will often have people that they're drawn to my energy and they find me. Like when I had my physical practice in Virginia Beach, people literally would stop their car, come in and go, I don't know why I had to come in here, but something told me I needed to see what you guys are about. Tell me, right? And so that's because the integrity is pure. And that's really the message that I hope to leave with you guys in this particular episode. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you have any comments, please, or questions or anything like that, put them below. And of course, like, share, subscribe, and comment for more.